Good evening and welcome. Oops. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Berea in Lesotho. Now, if you're a regular viewer of my channel, you know that after we go over the history and geography, I pull out Google Earth and we take a look at the area more in depth. But unfortunately, there just aren't very many pictures of this area. So instead, I'm just going to intersperse them throughout the video. But I, of course, highly encourage you to hop onto Google Earth yourself and check it out. Because literally while I was filming those bits for you, other slideshows popped up that I hadn't seen before. And they were kind of interesting. So please feel free to check it out. Berea, or the Berea Hills, as I see them most often referred to, and I didn't really draw it, it's just kind of right here. You can see it's located in northeastern Lesotho, just outside the capital of Maseru. Now, what's the deal with Lesotho? It is entirely surrounded by South Africa. And it's just a little tiny thing, right? Well, don't worry, we'll talk about that in history. But one of Lesotho's nicknames is the Kingdom in the Sky, because almost the entire country is covered in mountains. I'm going to throw the pictures of the mountains in Lesotho here. The branch of mountains that runs through our region and most of Lesotho are called the Maloti Mountains, and they are a branch of the Drakensberg Mountains that run here all along eastern South Africa. Beautiful mountain range, the Drakensberg Mountains, because it looks like a big dragon. The capital of the region is right here, Teateaneng. And there are many rivers that flow through these mountains, and they flow down to the Caledon River, which creates the border, not just Berea, but with Lesotho and the Free State in South Africa. So, neat little brief history here. The original inhabitants would be the San, which is a hunter-gatherer group that are still around mostly over there in the west of South Africa and southern Namibia. But they're still very much around today. There are some examples of San rock shelters in art, like around here or so, but I couldn't find any on Google Earth. I believe them. I just didn't see any for myself. Maybe you can find some. In the 5th century CE, the Bantu migration reached southern Africa, which the Bantu migration, Bantu-speaking peoples, traversed all across the continent. The Bantu-speaking peoples that arrived here were the Basotho. And during a time known mostly throughout South Africa, especially in the Zulu language and Zulu regions of South Africa, was the Mfakane, which was a very turbulent region, very turbulent times in the many regions of Southern Africa where groups were being pushed in and out. The Zulus were pushing in, other groups got pushed out, conflicts erupted. In Sesotho, I believe they don't call it Mfakane, they call it Lifakane. I believe that's how you pronounce that. But it definitely affected the Basotho people and split them into 3 different groups. There is the Northern Sotho, which live mostly in northern South Africa, Limpopo area up there. It created the Tswana, which is, you know and love from Botswana up there, and the Southern Sotho, which live here. The Southern Sotho were united in 1824 by King Moshoeshoe I. And he created Lesotho. So, a lot happening at this time, right? There are the Boer settlers of South Africa being pushed out themselves by the British, and they began the Great Trek across South Africa, moving farther north, taking with them all that they could carry and traveling out in wagons to parts unknown. And obviously, a bit of an issue for the people who already lived in these parts, including the Basotho here. Now, a big part of life here in Lesotho is cattle and cattle ranching. During these times, the more cattle you had, the more powerful you were. And no one had more cattle and was therefore more powerful than King Moshoeshoe I. Which, by the way, that's not actually his name, that's his title. Shwe is an onomatopoeia for shaving. So he was the one who shaved. Neat title, I think. Cattle raiding was also just a fact of life at this time, where, people would go out and steal cattle and bring them back, and that group would come back and steal more cattle. It was a big back and forth. It never really devolved, from what I can tell, into like massive wars, huge conflicts, but it was an irritating part of life here. So the British are slowly taking over more and more in South Africa. They were getting along with Lesotho and Moshoeshoe to a point when, after his people stole some cattle from their area, they were like, well, you can't do that. They're not familiar with this culture. To them, they basically just invaded, right? So in 1852, they fought the Battle of Berea against the Basotho and Moshoeshoe. It was pretty even, to be honest. And they were very successful in battle most of the time. Most famously, they fought the British during the gun wars of 1880, 1881 and defeated the British. Very impressive at that time. But they did start to lose battles to the Boers. So Moshoeshoe went to the British in 1868 and asked for help to get the Boers out. And of course, the British were very excited about that. One, because they hated the Boers. They fought two very huge wars. And two, all they saw was an opportunity to colonize. And they certainly did. And they called this area Basotho land, and had complete control by 1884. And thankfully, Lesotho had gained its independence in 1966. It still ran by a king today. They have their own government, but it's still ran by a king. An interesting little bit of history here in Berea are the Kome Caves, which were built in the early 19th century, so during the Mfakane, which was an attempt to hide out during all of the turmoil. And these really neat homes were built in the caves, and the ancestors of those people still live there today. Really beautiful little corner of the Berea Hills there. And that is all of the history that I have for you today. Sorry that it's so short, but once again, like I say, it's a tiny corner of a tiny country. There's so much more history in Lesotho to talk about. But that's all that I have for you that's related to this corner here. So I thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. Tomorrow's video is going to be much longer because we're going to England. We're going to go see what these British are all about. And we're going to an interesting part of England because it's a part that I've been to. Briefly, I visited some sights to see there, including Windsor Castle. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. If you learned anything new in this video, and I almost guarantee you did if you weren't familiar with Lesotho, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. And let me know your favorite parts down in the comments. I have a special treat for you because we're not going to Google Earth. We're going to do some nice little sounds. And because it's Lesotho, I'm trying to find little sounds to put at the end of videos that don't have Google Earth that are related to that country. So we're going to play with some cows. My brother-in-law collects cows. This is one of his many little cows. I also have this fun cow. It's very cute. And he has a beanbag butt. So we're going to hear beanbag sounds. All kinds of little cow sounds. So stay tuned for that. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good night.